to our meditation today. Um, so, so here's what I'm going to suggest. Um, is how about this? Rather than me cue you through any sort of like yoga movement to get settled, because we've talked about like with meditation, a little bit of movement just to get into the zone is a really nice way to go. And similarly, sorry, I'm not gonna realize I'm just gonna mess with my camera here for a second. I think that'll do it. And similarly, when we're moving, a little bit of meditation is dropping into that meditative space is a nice way to go. But I think both given the theme of today's practice and the fact that I'm gonna chit chat to you a little bit more than I might otherwise. Maybe if there's anything that you can do to help yourselves be comfortable, whether that's a few little twists. Ooh, see, I got a little back crack there, or moving your arms around, or really whatever kind of suits you, just to settle in. And I'll set us up. How does that sound? Yeah? Okay. So we continue with the practice of it's a Buddhist practice or series for the four immeasurables, which I feel like just in terms of any sort of concerns around cultural appropriation or expertise, or however you want to, any way you want to slice or dice it, I always feel like it's incumbent on me in terms of leading or instructing that I just broadcast early and often that I am neither speaking as a Buddhist nor for Buddhists, nor attempting to lift their wisdom for my own gain or anything like that. It's more the idea of like shared wisdom that I can use as a jumping off point for our own practice. And so that's how we ended up here. Well, actually, that and the fact that although she's not here today, I've at times I feel like I can hear the kind of as a mantra Deb in the background saying loving kindness, loving kindness, loving kindness. So so today's practice, we've already practiced obviously loving kindness, and we've practiced joy or sympathetic joy. And so today we move into the third of four of these four immeasurable practices. And today's practice is equanimity, which I feel like we get bonus points just for using what I call a $25 word, like a word that's perhaps a little bit more impenetrable than it needs to be. So how about this? How do we define equanimity to start off? How about okayness? I like okayness. I've heard it described as non-attachment. Sometimes people will call it neutrality or non-partisanship, like the idea that you are, whatever it is that you're experiencing, that you are not trying to shift it, that you're not trying to change it. And that's why I think I kind of like, I don't even know if that's a word, but okayness, like just like I'm okay with what's happening. And I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, you can all call me out on this. I feel like in some ways I introduce a practice that we're going to work with on a particular day, and I often point to my own, at times, struggle with or the challenges that I've faced within it. I don't know if that's a human tendency, I suppose, as well. But I really I've been sitting in equanimity practice, a dedicated equanimity practice a lot recently. And then really kind of focusing again because I know I was going to be leading this, and so it's almost just like to prepare. But there's just so much that we could unpack in terms of this practice, and so what I'm going to try to do is give you a sense of some of the background within the sort of this Buddhist school of meditation, but also connect it to our own lives and like what do we do with this? Like what's the point of this, or how would this like make my life less painful or more pleasurable? See, I'm sneaking into the Equanimous type language. So So there's that. And what I was alluding to was that I think that for me, equanimity has felt like a very high bar to meet. My partner was saying and watching, we were practicing actually just down there last week, and it's calling for rain amidst this humidity. So I'm realizing that probably being further away, not the best thing today. So I up close to the house that I come in if need be. And in any case, when she was watching, she said, it just seems to her, and I've definitely experienced this too, that when I'm practicing, when I'm meditating or practicing yoga, I'm generally speaking bringing the best version of me forward. Which is to say that, I feel like I'm kinder, I'm more open, I'm gentler, like all of, things, more virtuous ways of being. But I'm certainly, and I don't know, maybe I'm alone here, but I suspect not. I'm also keenly aware of the disconnect that can often exist between how, because it's not put on, right? Like if I'm having a bad day, I let people know I'm having a bad day, well, hopefully without spraying them with it. But I at least don't think that it's never appealed to me, the idea of being a yoga teacher or a meditation lead and somehow projecting this serenity that's, quite frankly, it's just bullshit, right? I just want to call it out as it is. Like, I don't know. I have sat with people, and I don't, again, obviously not naming names, and certainly not meaning to be critical, because I genuinely think everyone's just trying their best and doing things the way they think it makes sense for them. But for me, being anything but what I am, it has always just struck me as wrong, or trying to be something that I'm not, or that I'm not feeling in a particular time. So, all of that to say, I've really, I think, beaten up on myself a little bit over the years, in the sense that either I have observed or close friends and family have observed, you're not, they haven't used the word equanimity, they haven't said, you're not as equanimous as you might be. But more like, you seem agitated, you're angry about this, or you are this kind of person. Often, and I really think this isn't just me, we tend to identify with certain ways of being, whether that's emotion in our emotional life or how we see ourselves. And so on the one hand, I've held up this idea of equanimity. When I came to the practice, like, of meditation, one of my first teachers talked about this being like a cornerstone. You know and he actually described it as friendliness towards ourselves and towards our situation, which also works, right? So I'm going to keep throwing out different ways of describing this, and when you find the one that resonates, you just hold on to it and say, that's what works for me. But I've really recognized my own tendency to see that gap between what I see as being like the ideal of equanimity, which would be me actually being serene, like me, being here and all super chilled out, versus what often feels like the reality, which is like not that. And I don't know that sort of self-judgment is all that useful, but it's a thing, right? And I think we tend to do that. So something that you might be aware of within this practice, but just in your life, like, to what extent am I, or are you, identifying with moods or feelings or attitudes, thoughts that are just passing by, like they're just, they're here and then they're not, and sometimes they're here for longer than we might wish, but they're not us, right? They're just states of being. Yeah, and let me give you a bit more context in terms of the immeasurables. When we talk about loving kindness, when we talk about, sharing and feeling the joy of others, celebrating the successes of others, even if it's not directly related to us, that sympathetic joy, or compassion. Again, this may just be me, but I realized in just kind of unpacking these terms in terms of preparing this series for all of you, that I really think of those almost as like, they're almost like action verbs. Like, I've never identified and said to myself, like, you are loving kindness, like me, and that's a shame, because like, I mean, I would love to be loving kindness all the time, right? Or I would love to walk around and people identify that and say like, wow, look at that compassionate person. You know, when I see Michael, I see compassion. I hope, I wish, right? But in any case, I feel like with those three, they really feel like things I'm doing. And yet, interestingly, equanimity is something that I actually take on, or the lack thereof, feels like a way of identifying who I am. Does that make sense? Like, is that, yeah? Okay, cool. Good. As it would, if I, throw out all of that and you're like, dude, what are you talking about? But anyway, that's okay. So that, good. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay, awesome. So, all right. So what do we? So there's the personal context, and there's the context for how we've been practicing and why we've been practicing. So the why. So why would we want to approach equanimity? And more to the point, actually, in terms of my understanding of the four immeasurables, equanimity is often seen as being the necessary precondition of the other three, right? In other words, unless you can't really be compassionate if you get carried away in empathizing with someone else's suffering, right? You have to. There's a certain level of remove, being okay, so that you can help serve. In order to experience joy on behalf of others, you have to be okay with not experiencing it, maybe yourself. So in one sense, I suppose we could have started the practice with equanimity, but I also feel like in many ways, each of them builds on and feeds into one another. Like to put one above the others is maybe not necessary. Um, that being said, equanimity or okayness or friendliness, super useful in terms of our lives. Um, and if I was going to boil it down to why, and why I've myself have felt so much attachment to the idea of accomplishing or achieving equanimity, is because it's freedom. If you're not getting jerked around by your emotions, if you're not a slave to your thoughts or to your beliefs or to your cultural conditioning, right? Which we all to some extent are. We're marinating in it. we're both the benefactors and the victims, I guess, or survivors of who we are, where we grew up, the people who have been in our lives, the situations that have traumatized us or have built us up. Like all of that stuff helps shape how we see things and who we are, right? Um, and I think that equanimity is a superpower. It is the ability to have all of that chaos, all of that conditioning, all of that noise, all that static, and to not take it personally and to not identify with it, right? Kind of like what I was saying before, where I'm like, oh, I wish I could be this way of being. And instead, kind of let myself off the hook and let all of you off the hook, all of us, is just to say, it's a practice. It's a way of being, and we try, and then in the same way, if we're focused, we have a concentration practice that we're doing, we become distracted. I would never counsel any of you to say like, well, if you get distracted, time to get up and meditation's over. No, it's like we stop, we pause, and we say, oh, I got distracted, I woke up, I'm going to try it again. And same thing with letting go is a wonderful way of thinking about it, Larissa. Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, and isn't that interesting? Because in my own kind of just jotting notes for myself, stuff I want to talk about, I actually put what's arguably the converse of that. I said it's staying. So but I agree with you. I think that it is about letting go. Well, maybe please, you or anyone, feel free to speak to that, knowing that I'll repeat it just for the other camera. But um, I think it's being able to let go of being stressed about that's like not letting go of things so that we can be okay with our current conditions, um, but also staying with what is, like not bypassing or avoiding whatever's coming up. um, sure. yeah, the idea of knowing who you are and then letting go of the other stuff. Um, yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Although it's it's funny. For a long time, I thought I knew very well who I was, and you know what? The longer I look at it, the less sure I am, in a good way, actually. Um, but but yeah, I think that's a useful way of approaching it as well. What you're suggesting of me. Mm-hmm. Okay, let me throw out one final idea, and then or kind of package of ideas, and then we'll sit. Okay, like I said, I knew that today was going to be a bit of a setup, but so within Buddhist practice, there's something called the eight. I just love saying this. The eight vicissitudes. How's that? The eight vicissitudes, or sometimes they're called the earthly winds, like these kind of conditions that blow through our lives. Um, okay, and so they're a series of opposites, and typically, I think for most people, we tend to want to be attached to or like hold on to, the one set, and then we want to push away the opposite. They're opposite. So there's gain and there's loss. There's pleasure and there's pain. There's praise, which just feels damn good, and there's blame, which even if it's not earned, kind of sucks, right? Like no one's like, ooh, excellent, I got more blame. And on a related note, there's fame, or in our culture, there's so with social media and everything is so inward focused, but also like broadcasting our own lives out. So there's fame, and then there's disrepute. There's shame, which I think so. Those are the eight. Gain, loss, pleasure, pain, praise, and blame, fame, and shame. And I think that so much of that's where I say this is such a useful idea to play with, not just in practice but in life, because it touches on economics, it touches on political disagreements, it touches on our social relationships and our social capital, how we see ourselves in relation to others, and so on. And it kind of relates to culture, which it's interesting that like when I grew up, the idea of culture was like a gift, right? Like I thought about like our cultural inheritance. That was an idea that was passed down to me, in principle by my grandfather, and I was just like really in awe of that. Like you're young and you can learn, and there's this whole world that's been passed on to you. And yet the current moment we're in, there's so much, people talk about culture, and it's often followed by the word war. Like we're in a culture war, especially with our American neighbors to the south, which is unfortunate. And I guess all of that is to say, I think that being aware of those vicissitudes, of those strong gale force winds that can blow through us, and seeing that they are just ideas, they're just passing ways of being, and that they don't define us, is kind of a way of stepping out of those cultural wars, out of this like tendency right now where everyone, it feels, at least to me, like there's a lot of finger pointing and blaming, and people, that we get into canceling and all of that stuff. So maybe what the world needs is more okayness. you know so that's the pitch. That's the big setup. And so like I said, what if you were going to say like, why would I do this? I mean, one, who doesn't need more okayness in their lives? But also, it's like I said, I think it's freedom, or to put it into the language of the pro meditators, it's liberation. You're liberated once you can kind of step out of all of that stuff. Okay, so all right, so that's a lot. Let's just let that all kind of settle, or you can just put it aside. And it's there, like it'll be on the video, so you can check it out and pick away at it for what it's worth after the fact. Let's sit. Okay, let's sit. And I'm gonna actually suggest two different practices. Oh, we've got Perry coming. Perfect timing. I wasn't being facetious there, by the way. I said, like, actually, we just are, but if ever I was going to go long, what great timing. In the setup, I mean. Hey, Perry, welcome. Welcome. We're just about to sit, so you're in perfect time. So let yourself get comfortable. and organize yourself however, physically, however makes sense. Okay? You could be lying, you could be sitting, you could be standing, you could be doing anything as long as you can be this sort of balance of relaxed and alert. Okay? And I'm going to actually suggest that in terms of where you place your attention today, often we practice in a focused way. So we pick a focal point, whether that's our breath or some element of our situation. Instead, I'm actually going to suggest, and if this seems too much, like if this seems too unfocused, then you can always come back to an anchor, like the breath. But otherwise, let your awareness be flexible, which is to say, it may move around a little bit. You may notice one thing, and then notice it changing or not, and then it peters out and maybe your attention drops into something else. Okay, so that's the idea of, we're not taking everything in, we're not super focused, we're being deliberate, but we're allowing our attention to move a bit, or be moved. And let's take 3 intentional breaths to start off. Eyes can be open, eyes can be closed. I think I'm going to practice eyes open today, actually, just for me. But again, whatever floats your meditative boat, we want to be okay with. This is the okayness. Be okay with whatever way you're going to organize yourself. And then just settle into a regular pattern of breath, not trying to control anything. The equanimity starts there. Just being okay with, maybe it feels a little bit differently than you'd like, or than it usually does. And so I'm going to share a couple of different ways that you might approach this sit. We'll start with the most simple, the most basic, and because I am a simple and basic guy, or at least I try to be, this is my equanimity practice. And it's definitely not mine in the sense of having developed it, but this is the one that I sit often when I feel like I need a bit more okayness. And it's simply to sit with this question: what if there's no problem to solve? So you might ask that question and then just notice with that flexible awareness, what's going on? What is left in the background if you're not trying to change your situation? What if there's no problem to solve? And I'll give you another option in a few minutes, but whether you choose to stay with this question, and that's your practice for today, that's wonderful. That's, like I said, that is often where I go and I stay. So you can, as Larissa said, let go of all the rest. Let go of the judgments, let go of the planning, let go of the judging, let go of the thinking. And you're just being. What if there's no problem to solve? Say if thoughts come up, or if sensations distract you, or anything else, something in your environment, because that'll happen. It's bound to happen. And if it doesn't, cool. But when it does, or if it does, okayness. What if there's no problem to solve here right now? Taking a little peek underneath, under the hood. When we let go of the troubles of our mind, measuring gain and loss, what if we stepped out of that? No problem to solve. If we let go of judgments around what feels pleasurable, or our experience of pain, not figuring a way out of it, not trying to change it, no problem to solve. What if we are misunderstood? What if we aren't celebrated? Or worse, are judged, are singled out? I can be okay with these things. I cannot get caught up in those stories and the whole sort of social game. Can I be okay without taking that on as a problem? And then, what's behind that? And if all or any of that's too abstract, notice your own tendency to judge how the sit itself is going. Have your mind kind of talking back to you. You got distracted. You're feeling discomfort. When will this be over? It could be, there's dozens, there's hundreds of things. Mind likes to grasp, it wants something to do. But what if there's no problem to solve? So you can stay, just checking the time there, you can stay with that, or we drop in an alternative way of practicing with equanimity. And again, this is complementary, so it needn't take away from asking that sort of central question. Just notice the nature of experience. Notice the tendency. Notice the certainty, in fact, of change. Rather than getting stressed when something pleasant ends, or that it may end, because it will. Okayness. rather than despairing at pain and wondering, can I do this? Will this ever end? Just watch it flow. And here's maybe a more specific instruction. Whatever it is you happen to be paying attention to, whether in this moment, just remember what I said, flexible awareness, so it might be a bodily sensation, it might be an emotional tone in your body and your mind, it might be the crying of the bird off my shoulder, something in your environment, or your thinking, judging, moving brain. Whatever it is that you're dwelling in, notice how it's not constant. And invariably, it will shift. Don't try to hold on to it, and don't push it away. Just let it go. Let it be. Be useful to bring a little smile to your face. Now, that seemed hokey, just drop it, don't worry about it. But again, we're just being super chill, super easy going. Okayness. Good natured. Non-reactive. Observing what is, and what is, and then what isn't. And as the nature of whatever you're paying attention to shifts and morphs and flows, not so much allowing your attention to wander, as just noting that this is the nature of all experience. And so fighting it or resisting it is in a sense creating a problem where none need exist. So you can also just gauge your reaction, or I should say your response to it, whatever it is. Aha, I was enjoying that and now it's not here. Oh, I'm enduring this. But there it goes. You see? I feel like if we can really drop into this, there's a certain wisdom here where we kind of on one level, we kind of know this, like our body knows this. If we don't get in the way with our own sort of preoccupations, our own agenda. nature of change doesn't mean that it isn't slippery, that it isn't, that it's necessarily going to be easy to hold on to, or to, not the right way, to stay with. One way of maybe grounding this practice a little bit, this slippery practice, is picking up and noticing when you notice. Noticing when you notice change. Is it as it happens? Is it as it dissolves and completes itself, whatever the cycle of flow is, a feeling, a thought, something in your environment? Or is it after the fact, where you kind of just catch it and go, oh, right, that just happened. That's not happening. Or despite your best intention, notice I didn't say effort, your best intention, that you catch yourself subtly trying to control your experience. Struggling with the inevitability of all the shifts, all the impermanence, the uncertainty. All of that can sound, again, a bit highfalutin, a bit kind of, yogi mumbo jumbo, but I really don't think it needs to be. This is the day-to-day, the moment-by-moment experience that we live. There's a distraction, and it's gone. A feeling rises, it passes away. And can we just not be stressed about it? Enjoying what's there to enjoy, abiding what might be more challenging. All the time, observing, witnessing, not resisting. Dropping into that deep acceptance of what is, while it is, for as long as it is. Final moment or two of our set. Let's direct our attention now in a more specific way. Acceptance of ourselves. That tendency to be critical, to want to change or be in some other way about or as ourselves. Can you just truly accept who you are right now? As you are, right now. And go easy on yourself. And it's starting to rain. I'm equanimous about it, but my technology is gonna not be, so I'm gonna just move it back a little bit. Take a moment. Take your time. Let yourself off the hook. And I'm gonna sit here in the rain. This is like the perfect ending, oh my gosh. All right. hold on a second. I'm gonna wave goodbye to the recorded version, but I won't. Everyone that's live, you don't have to go anywhere. But I'm not gonna stay here in the rain. Like I say, I won't melt, but the computers are gonna start glitching out any second here. So let me just. Sorry for the